and welcome to the Beckoning Bookshelf. I'm your host, Jeffrey Ashcraft. I have known the story of A Christmas Carol for many years, and one thing always bothered me about it. Why did Jacob Marley never receive the same chance that Scrooge did at redemption? It never seemed fair. Scrooge was lucky enough to know someone like Marley who was willing to warn him of his fate, yet Marley was never that lucky? He never knew someone like that? Well, I'm not the only person who wondered about this because someone wrote a book about it. A book about Jacob Marley. Jacob T. Marley was written by R. William Bennett and published in 2011. Now, if you're thinking, I haven't heard of that book or the author. Well, it might be because Bennett has only written 3 books, at least according to my research, and they're all rather small novellas and all Christmas themed. So, that might be why you haven't heard of him yet. This book was clearly inspired by A Christmas Carol and serves as both a companion and a prequel to the classic tale. It tells the story of Jacob Marley before he was dead as a doornail. But it also tells what Jacob Marley was up to, what he was doing during the events of A Christmas Carol. To compare it to a more popular and well-known book, it's kind of like what Gregory Maguire's Wicked is to The Wizard of Oz. It tells the same story through a different perspective, giving us additional details into the world that we were not previously given, nor did we know. Now, I should point out that this is not canon. This is literally what Bennett imagines Jacob's story could have been. And Bennett adds a lot of new details to the story, a lot of which I like. Particularly, I like how Bennett makes Marley not just another Scrooge. They're 2 different people. Yes, they're both greedy, prideful, old misers, at least at one point. But their paths to that and the foundations of that greed are different. And I liked that. I also liked how he portrayed the partnership between Scrooge and Marley. Because you think, like, who would want to work with Scrooge apart from Bob Cratchit, who's a saint? Well, they were literally just partners because of the monetary value. They knew that the other guy would give them more money. That's it. And they would happily throw the other under the bus if it got them a few coins. In fact, they do that more than once. So, yeah, they weren't friends. They didn't like each other. They just knew that the other was valuable money-wise. That's it. And the book is very well written, though I have to make this comparison. It is not as well written or as well crafted as A Christmas Carol. So that's kind of a high bar to hit. So, and you may only really notice this if you read them back to back like I did. I read A Christmas Carol and then I read Jacob T. Marley, and the differences in writing are very stark. But if you have a little space between them, then maybe the differences won't be as apparent. But still, like I said, the book is very well written, and it has all the same themes as A Christmas Carol does, but it approaches them in a very different way. Where A Christmas Carol is a mysterious fairy tale of redemption, Jacob T. Marley is more just a straight-up story of redemption, just very blunt. And this is good and bad. It depends on what you like to read and the stories that you enjoy. For me, while I enjoyed the story, I kind of feel it was a little too straightforward and blunt. For example, it goes out of its way to explain pretty much every unresolved mystery of A Christmas Carol. And so it kind of takes away some of the magic and wonder from the original story. So for example, it talks about why Scrooge's father was harsh, at least to Scrooge. It talks about, it explains why the ghost of Christmas is yet to come is silent. It even explains why the spirits all visit in one night versus 3, like Marley said they would. These explanations are kind of unnecessary. like I said, it removes the lure of the unknown of the original tale, some of the magic and the wonder. Now, this book does have some unresolved mysteries of its own, which are good and well told, but I feel like it would have benefited more if it kept or even emphasized some of the unresolved mysteries from A Christmas Carol. It would have been more fairy tale-like. At times, it kind of is leaning a little bit more towards a textbook than a fairy tale because of how many explanations there are. And while I'm on, qualms, I have one other small qualm with the book, and that's the fact that I think the connections between Marley and Scrooge are a little too many, too coincidental, making them seem a little too forced. So, but that's my own opinion. So, it's just a small qualm I have. I'm still glad that Bennett explored the story. And I still think he explored the story in a good way. Because like I said, I always wondered why Marley was never given the same chance as Scrooge. I mean, if he had been, he would have probably said something in his lamentations to Scrooge, in his warning. He would have said, heed the warning, because I didn't. Something like that. Dickens would have written it in a better way. But, he probably would have mentioned it, but he doesn't. So it made me wonder that he never got that same chance. Well, Bennett addresses this in a very, very good way. And this is slight spoilers. I'll be honest, it's slight. Both Marley and Scrooge were given numerous chances, various chances to change. They just weren't this miraculous visitation of spirits that are able to travel through time. They were small, everyday occurrences that the spirits were sending to both Marley and Scrooge. That the spirits were always encouraging them to change. Were always trying to help them change. And I really liked that. Scrooge himself had various chances of change in that very Christmas Eve before he has the visit from Marley. Fred arrives and invites him to Christmas dinner. The gentleman looking for donations for the poor. The child caroling outside his door. The very presence of Bob Cratchit. That's one of the things that I like that Bennett emphasizes, is that Bob Cratchit works for Scrooge for a reason. That they can help each other. Primarily, Cratchit helping Scrooge. But Scrooge could help Cratchit in learning about the professional world. Scrooge is very good at that. But Cratchit could help Scrooge in learning about humanity and virtue. Because of just how pure, how good of a person he is. And I like how Bennett emphasizes that both characters had numerous chances to change. They just weren't heeding those chances. And eventually, Scrooge did get this big miraculous event, and that did get him to change, but he didn't enjoy that miraculous event. It wasn't a fun time for him. The smaller chances to change would have been easier pills to swallow than the big miraculous one. Now, I like how Bennett approaches that. And I will say just something about the ending that I really liked. I'm not going to say what it was because I'm not going to spoil anything, but I really like how Bennett adds to Scrooge's story after that fateful Christmas. And I like some of the things that he adds to Scrooge's story to give it closure. Very good ending. Really enjoyed it. So I'm not going to spoil it. You'll have to find out for yourself. So that's all I have for you today. Have you read Jacob T. Marley? Are you interested in reading Jacob T. Marley? Have you ever wondered Marley's story? Particularly, did you have the same concern that I, and apparently Bennett did, in the fact that why did Marley never get the chance that Scrooge did? Well, now's your chance to find out. Now's your chance to learn more about Marley. Thank you for being here. Thank you always for being here. I hope you're having a Merry Christmas season. Now go find yourself a good book.